Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
Borders grew up in Reynolds, Georgia, and got a job at a little 9-hole course where he raked bunkers, swept floors, and cut grass until one day.
And then one day the golf professional left suddenly and they had no one to run the shop or anything. So myself and another lady, she took the pool and the tennis courts, and I took the golf course and ran the shop under the tutelage of obviously some adults, but I was doing that at 14.
For over 30 years, Chris Borders was a driving force behind the success of the Atlanta Athletic Club. During his time at the AAC, the club hosted tournaments like the 76 U.S. Open, the 81, 2001, and 2011 PGA Championships, the 1990 U.S. Women's Open, plus many other notable events like the 100th anniversary of the club and the 75th anniversary of Bobby Jones' Grand Slam. And his efforts to develop friendships and partnerships between the Atlanta Athletic Club and clubs in the UK helped make the Athletic Club one of the premier clubs in the world.
There's not very many other clubs that have a relationship with clubs overseas like the Athletic Club does.
And those friendships are akin to Bobby Jones' famous speech about friendship. Friendship to him is, and to his friends, is priceless.
Okay, I have with me my lifelong friend, Chris Borders. We have one thing in common for sure, is that we grew up in this little town called Reynolds, Georgia, where I have said many times, welcome to Reynolds and hurry back could have been on the same sign. But Chris, thank you for taking time out and joining us. Your story is incredible. And I think your story from coming from the little town of Reynolds on that little 9-hole golf course that you and I both know every shot on that course like the back of our hand, played it so many times, and to go to be running Atlanta Athletic Club for whatever you did, 35 years, and eventually becoming in the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame, and all you did for golf worldwide. It was just not in the United States. It's an incredible story. So thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure, Bruce. Glad to be a part of anything that you're doing, the humor, the history, and the funny stories, and the truth that you put out there has been enjoyable for everybody to read.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And this is fun. This podcasting thing is new to me. I'm learning as I go, but it's certainly a lot of fun. So let's talk a minute. I remember you were 7 years older than me. You graduated from high school in '65, if I think that is correct, right?
That's right. The last graduating class at Reynolds High School.
Yeah, the last one. So I went to Fort Valley and graduated in '72. So I'm 7 years younger. So that means when I was in the 5th grade, you were graduating. So I remember you a lot better than you would remember me, although everybody knew everybody in Reynolds, but still you look up to people older than you. And I certainly looked up to you, especially at the golf course. Let's start back. You were born in Perry, Georgia. Is that right?
That's correct. I was born there, but didn't stay there but just a few months. My father started after World War II. He started with Flint, and he started as a meter reader. And of course, 36 years later, and before that, he had finally worked himself through all the positions, and he had made it to manager, and then they moved him over when he worked for Jim Mills at Warner Robin.
What are your general memories of growing up in this little town?
Oh gosh, the fact that number one, you hear all the kids now, I could walk to school because, we only lived what would be considered 2 blocks away. And I had to walk through Sandy Hinton's front yard just to get around to the back of the school. So, and Tom Sawyer across his corner of his lot with the pecan trees and there. So being so close to school, we walked. When I got a bike when I was young, I could ride uptown and go buy a Coca-Cola for my mother and bring it back in the basket of my bicycle. My father would walk to work when the weather was good. You know, it was what considered, I don't know, 6 blocks away or something.
Right.
But and everybody was, you just knew everybody. If you were in the Baptist church or the Methodist church, which, as you know, were the two anchors
Right.
of Reynolds, but you knew everybody because you'd get out of your car. My father would get out of the car parked over at the Methodist church, and he'd sort of look over toward the Baptist church and look over through the trees, and he'd go, uh-huh. I don't see so and so there this morning. I bet he was out partying last night. You know?
Yeah.
So you knew everybody's business, and today that would probably make a lot of people nervous. It didn't make us nervous.
Well, I think that it's a good thing and a bad thing to know everybody's business, but the
Yeah.
relationships that there's no put on, there's no facade, because everybody knows who you really are. Everybody knows whether you went to church Sunday or what time you got home Saturday night. It passed around pretty quickly, right? It passed along pretty quickly. So it created people in my mind that were pretty plain spoken and didn't try to put on fronts to be somebody that they were not, because we grew up in an environment where everybody really knew you. I mean, we knew your parents' name, your dog's name, and everything about you, right?
There was one time when I knew that everybody in town, I really didn't realize everybody in town knew me. Wasn't it Wayne Hill that had the barbershop
Yep.
across from Mr. Jim's?
Yep.
A bicycle home one day,
Yeah.
and I pulled it across the street, right down there by the Methodist church. I was in a rush. I pulled right out in front of him. He slammed on brakes, scared me to death, and he got out. He was yelling at me. And he went right home, picked up the phone, and called my father and said, "You better tell Chris he got to watch out." My father came to me and said, "If I not taught you how to ride that bicycle," scared me then. And I realized then I got my haircut from Mr. Jim. I didn't get my haircut from Wayne Hill, but everybody knew who I was, and they'd pick up that phone, make that call, say, "Your kid's over here messing up." So
The Methodist kid went to Jim Brewer. The Baptist went to Wayne Hill.
you know what? I hadn't really thought about that. Now, I think Rusty is one of my best friends growing up. I think he did go to Wayne. Now, but I know that Mike and Bobby went to Mr. Jim. So
Yeah. So there you go, right? There you go.
Hadn't thought about that.
So I know you also developed lifelong relationships in Reynolds that you still, there are people in that class, especially in 1965, that you will be friends with to the day you die, right?
And we try to get together as much as we can. I have a cabin up in Blue Ridge, and for the last 6 years, we've been gathering as many as we can to get into that cabin and another one local, just down the river, so to speak, to spend Reynolds High School summer camp and enjoy one another's company. And we sit out on the porch, and it's just like you can imagine the hollering and the squalling and the laughing going on, reliving all of our good times in Reynolds. And it's just been amazing. And I strengthened that, I think, in the last number. As you get older, Bruce, you just begin to appreciate your upbringing, particularly if you had a good one.
Right.
If you didn't have a good one, I can understand how people don't want that. But I've never seen any group of people that I have been in, from here to Edinburgh, Scotland, to Malaga, Spain, to Atlanta, Georgia, and Woodstock, that say, "You still close with that many of your high school friends?" Oh, yes. And we talk regularly.
Yeah.
And we talk about fun things and substantial things and life's changes. And it's like when you pick up a conversation, not having seen someone in 6 months or a year, it's like you never left.
Right. And what I've noticed, Chris, is that everybody didn't have that opportunity. And the people that obviously did very well in life. Doesn't mean you have to have that opportunity, but with these deep-seated relationships like this, people that grew up in the bigger cities, they probably didn't know their neighbor across the street too well, or they were in and out. And it was just the same group of people here that you grew up with. And you're right. It doesn't take long to strike up a conversation. I mean, a real conversation. And
No,
so it's pretty cool.
not at all. And I, I can't pass along to people so strongly. I think what that contributed to my upbringing, and the fact, Bruce, you combine that with the fact that most all of us, I know there were a few exceptions here and there from all of our classes, but most all of us had strong, good parents that showed us the way.
Right. And that was my next question. Talk about your mom and dad just a minute. They just didn't come any finer. And I mean, you were blessed to have your parents, as I was.
Well, my father was a very kind man. He did not like a lot of upheaval in his life. He was concerned about people. And as he rose up through the ranks at Flint Electric, from a meter reader to a climber to a lineman to a supervisor to a manager, I can remember, I think I gathered more, Bruce, from the fact that watching him sit down with my mother, whether it was at the dinner table every night at 6:30, as you know how we all ate together back then. I don't think anybody does anymore.
Right.
And listening to the adult conversation between my mother and father, but then maybe a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock at night over the table. I'm back in my room, supposedly studying, but I was more listening to them. He was struggling with an issue of one of his employees that wasn't performing, that had personal problems, whatever it was. And he would look at my mother and go, Polly, this man has got 4 kids and he's messed up so bad. If I let him go, which I should, he's got no future. And who's going to take care of those kids? And his concern for people, I think, helped follow me, or did follow me. And I think it helped me in my management roles. And I like to think of them better as leadership roles than management, in trying to get from point A to point B for the clubs that I worked at and the experience that I got. So,
I have no doubt. They laid the foundation for your success. You saw what success looked like sitting in there, and you became the person that you did.
and let me tell you about the contrast, Bruce. You might not have realized it as much growing up, but my father was a Marshallville, Montezuma, Fort Valley, dyed-in-the-wool redneck Southerner, and my mother was a dyed-in-the-wool New Englander from Manchester, New Hampshire. Now you put those two together, and you've got two distinct personalities.
All right.
But they cared so much for one another. Of course, my father met my mother during World War II when he was stationed at Grenier Field in New Hampshire. They felt so much for each other. I saw them argue one time, only once in my entire upbringing did I see them argue. And you can imagine it was 1960 and John F. Kennedy was running for president. And because of my father's rather traditional, old-fashioned, and certainly outdated political views, he turned to my mother at dinner one night and said, Polly, I just don't know if I can vote for a Catholic. And she looked up, and there was a bowl of potatoes on the table, and she threw a spoonful of potatoes at him and got up and walked into the back of the house. The silence and the look of surprise on my father's face was stunning. And he said, well, I guess I've got a lot of work to do from the mistake I have made. My mother grew up as an Episcopalian, which is just a wannabe Catholic anyway.
Right.
And she used to make the statement that up in New Hampshire, while we're Episcopalian, we meet you at the front door with a cocktail in one hand and the Bible in the other. You know, so My father, that didn't sit too well with him being a teetotaler, but he could get a kick out of it. But when I saw them argue about that, and it continued on for a day or two with my mother giving my father a cold shoulder, seeing things like that and knowing that my first experience that, hey, not all of life is completely perfect. But we were sheltered, Bruce, really.
Yeah.
Our parents didn't do that, I don't think, on purpose, but they allowed us to be children and we played. Gosh, in my backyard, J.E. Beelan's backyard, Henry Posey's, the Whiteleys, the Sawyers across the street, we'd get together, at 9 o'clock at night and be playing kick the can.
Right.
And Bobby Martin and Mike Brunson might come over. James Hinton might come up. Sandy, Rusty would come down. Billy Lee that lived down. Holy smokes. There'd be a crowd of kids. And everybody knew that around 10 o'clock, a bunch of parents were going to come to the front door or the front porch and start whistling. My father had a big whistle. And we sort of knew, okay, you got about 10 minutes to wrap this up, boys. It's time to go in.
Before we get into the golf course, of course, you played other sports. I know you played basketball in Reynolds. We had golf, basketball, and baseball and track, I guess, is what we had in Reynolds. But you played on a team with it turned out to be a great basketball player. I think he had 89 college scholarship offers. So tell us a little bit about all that experience and playing sports in high school in Reynolds.
Well, first of all, you can talk to Rusty Lane about this. Rusty had to teach me how to play basketball. My father was very concerned when I was coming up. I was sort of sulky as a child. I loved to fish. I loved to go out to T. Whiteley's pond, and I could fish out there all day by myself with my bicycle. But I wasn't getting into any sports. But I wasn't very good at sports, and Rusty would come down. My father set up a basketball goal in the backyard, and Rusty started teaching me how to play basketball. And Troy Athan came as the coach, and we got on B team, and I was able to make the team. But I was usually the fifth guy, Bruce. That's where I was. Troy Athan came to me and said, "Chris, you're going to be our fifth man now." And he said, "You have one job in life and one job only, and that's to feed the ball to Visage." And I knew I didn't even fight that. And I would shoot. I think I graduated with playing 2 years, junior and senior year on the team, first string, Bruce. I think I graduated with a 3.2 point average, where Rusty, Jimmy, Donald Hartley, and then there was Ronnie. And I remember distinctly on 2 different nights feeding the ball to Ronnie so much. One night we played Unadilla. He scored 52 points. Another night we played Ellaville, and I think he scored 49. Ronnie Visage was absolutely awesome on the basketball court from the time he was in the 9th grade. And they knew he was bound for good things. And the sad thing was, and I mean, this was really sad, in our senior year in the regional playoffs over in Fort Valley, Ronnie got sick in the middle of the game. And you remember he just about passed out on the court. And everybody said, "What happened?" And we went on, and I think we lost that game to Roberta, which there was no chance we were going to lose prior to that. But Ronnie, his big hands, his movements on the court were as good for basketball back then as LeBron James is now. If he was 20 feet out or if he was underneath the basket, he could fake out anyone. I just used to watch in sheer admiration. 2 guys would be on him and he'd fake both of them out and go up, make 2 points. And watching him score, we all knew that we were there to support Ronnie. And when we lost that game, region game in Fort Valley to, I think it was Roberta, you know who I was as heartbroken for as anybody was Troy Athan, because
Coach.
we were on our way to go to state at that point, and that hadn't happened in years for Reynolds. And so,
Let's talk about your golf. At some point, golf became your game. And how'd you start playing?
but there was a time period in the late 50s that they just let the golf course go until the Kiwanis Club, your dad, Richard Parks, a whole lot of key people said, we got to get this golf course fixed back up. But to start out, my father, so he started taking me with Wade Lane and all those older men to Pine Needles in Fort Valley. And they'd play 18 holes, and I'd just walk along, poking at snakes in the woods and looking for golf balls. And that kept me sort of interested. And I was spending time with my father. Once again, he was worried about my lack of athletic ability, which I never had a whole lot. One day, the other gentleman did not accompany us to Fort Valley, and it was just me and him. He said, you're going to come out with me, and you're going to play some golf. I still have the club, Bruce, that he gave me. Have no idea where he got it. It's an adjustable iron. You take an Allen wrench and you can make a 3, 5, 7, 9, and a putter out of it. It's as heavy as a sledgehammer. And here I was about 10 and a half, 11 years old, and I'm trying to swing that thing and hit the golf ball. But he put that on the third hole at Pine Needles, if you ever remember that little course, right down there by the road.
Very much. I remember.
Par 3, it's about 145 yards long. He said, turn that club to a 5-iron, and I did, and he set it up, and I swung, and I knocked the ball up there. I just flushed it. I knocked it up about, I don't know, 16, 18 inches from the cup. And he turned around and he told me later on in life, he said, I knew I had you then because the look on your face was pure exhilaration. You had just hit a real golf shot. And from that point on, I wanted to go with him and play.
You were bit. You were snake bit at that time.
Totally. And it just took one shot because my mother used to say, Chris is complaining about going over there and following you all around on the golf course. And it's just, I was getting bored. Obviously, the golf course and the pool, we had always gone, and I don't know if you remember that, we had always gone to the pool in the summertime. I couldn't wait.
Yes.
For vacation Bible school to get over with because, you know, school would end on a Friday. If the next Monday, the parents weren't about to let us go, they started vacation Bible school, both in the Methodist and the Baptist churches, and we'd have 2 weeks of that.
Right.
Well, as soon as that was over, every kid in the world and their mamas were heading to the pool.
In the coldest water ever.
That artesian well water was unbelievable. But I remember the kids would walk out onto the golf course then, Bruce, that had not been kept up. Because I don't know if you remember on number 7, there was a catalpa tree on the left side. And during the month of July, the catalpa worms would just cover that thing up. And H.C. Bond had told me, he said, son, in July, don't you let that go by because those catalpa worms are the best food for those brim down there in the Patsalaga Creek. Well, H.C. Bond would take me down there before I was even playing golf with a cane pole to show me how to catch those fish. We'd walk out there on the golf course to get those catalpa worms. We'd barefooted and there were sand spurs everywhere. A whole bunch of kids running around squalling and squealing. You'd get back and your mama would have to pick the sand spurs out of our feet. Somewhere right in there, that's when the Kiwanis Club took over the golf course. And Kurt was there later in the summer, and I got to know him. And the next summer, I went to work for Kurt. But I remember top dressing greens, and Kurt started to have some tournaments. We went through the summer, and it was around Labor Day. Kurt, on the sly, decided he was going to sell beer out of the back of the little brick concrete block building. And let me tell you, your daddy and 2 other men, I remember your father coming in. And when your father had something on his mind and he had a serious look on his face and not one of those mischievous looks, you better get out of his way. I was out there when they came looking for Kurt. But your father was an imposing. I mean, he was tall, and he was just an imposing presence in any room, as you know, wherever you went. And next thing I knew, Kurt was going to his trailer. You remember that he lived on a trailer at the top of the hill?
Yeah.
And the next morning, everything was gone. It was all gone.
So let me put a comma right here. This is Chris Borders, and he's talking about at the Reynolds Golf Course. He all of a sudden found himself helping Kurt Hammond, who was the golf professional or golf manager. I think he was a professional.
Yeah.
But Chris Borders became, for 35 years, and I will get that correct in a minute, I think somewhere around 35 years, he was a general manager at Atlanta Athletic Club, one of the most prestigious golf courses in the United States or in the world as far as that goes. He's impacted golf all over the world. We're going to hear a little bit about that in just a minute. But this is where it started, on this little 9-hole golf course where it took everybody just to keep in town, sometimes just to keep the grass cut. It's a heck of a story. So when you were talking about your dad being a good person, this is my memory. So, of course, I started playing golf when I was 8 or 9 too. And I was out there playing golf. Mama dropped me off. We played golf. We played 7, 8 rounds a day or whatever it was on a Saturday. But I remember being on number 8 tee, and you being, you were probably senior in high school. I was probably in the 5th grade or whatever that was. And you noticed that I was swinging across the ball. And you said, let me show you something. And you put a couple of tees on the ground and showed me how to swing more inside out. I wasn't swinging across the ball. And you just did it because you were being nice. You saw a kid, said, I can help him. And it took 4 or 5 minutes of your time, but it's a memory that lasted the rest of my life.
Wow. Bruce, I confess I don't remember that.
I'm sure.
I do remember as a high school kid taking a bunch of the kids and would take them out to the golf course. But they were both girls and boys, and I spent some time. And what did I learn from? I had learned from my father, all the other parents out there, from your father to Wade Lane to whoever, the swing. And of course, we didn't have videos or YouTube or anything to watch back then, but we had golf magazines, and you could sort of mimic a swing. My regret to this day is that I never took formal lessons when I was young, but I sort of wish I had swing. Everybody wanted to swing, as you know, like Arnold Palmer,
right,
or Gary Player. I didn't realize giving my time, just like you had said, was making such an impact. I was just interested in a lot of the kids getting out there to play. And one of my greatest memories, Bruce, was we had the state Class C golf championships at Reynolds in my junior year. And I shot 33-38 on the first day, 71 to lead it by 2 shots. I blew it. The choke apple came up on the second day. I remember Edwards Cooper and a bunch of the other guys, Woodrow Wilson, all that clan, came out to see me play. They wanted to see how I was doing. Made me so nervous, couldn't hardly draw the club back. And I shot 78, and I finished in 4th place. And the team finished in 4th place. My biggest disappointment in life.
So you were learning how to play golf, and you were obviously the star on the golf team, and you guys had a pretty good golf team. All of you are still friends. The people that are still alive are still friends.
Yeah.
And so you left Reynolds High School, you graduated, you went to Mercer, and you walked on and made the golf team at Mercer. Isn't that correct?
I did. Walking on, I made the team, and I got a $500 scholarship. In 1965, $500 was a lot of money. Did not know that I was going to be in the golf business, because not only did I need that $500, and my parents needed to help me get through Mercer. Mercer was not an inexpensive school, but I signed up for ROTC because they would pay you to be in that program. And I needed that money as well.
And you went on after that to Vietnam in the U.S. Army. You served. How long were you there?
Well, I got very lucky. Bruce, because my designation was infantry. I was an infantry platoon leader when I graduated, went to Fort Benning, got my infantry officer basic. My wife and I, who I had met from Wesleyan, she was from Griffin, we got married and they sent us, of all things, to the exotic place of Hawaii. We spent almost 2 years there with orders to go to Vietnam. But one day, and my life has been just shattered here and there with pure luck. One day playing golf, because I did not give up golf just because I was in the Army. We had two golf courses on Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. And I was able to play at least once a week. And one day I got paired up with a general and he said, son, we need a secretary of the U.S. Army Hawaii Golf Association here to run these golf courses. Would you like to apply? Well, you can imagine. Of course I did. I went in on Monday morning and had the interview, and they called me later and they said, you didn't get the job. I was crushed. Went back to the company area, did about 2 weeks worth of training. They called me back up and said, we need you to come back in and interview for this job. I said, what happened? They said, well, the lieutenant we hired to do that had some problems and he can't do it. I went back in and got hired. And for the next year, I ran the 3 Army golf courses in Hawaii: Fort Shafter, Leilehua, and Schofield Barracks, Kalakaua. And that, almost by accident, Bruce, started me in this business. However, after about not quite a year, about 10 months of doing that, some PFC up in the Pentagon said, what is this? An infantry lieutenant is running golf courses? We've just had the Tet Offensive 1969 in Vietnam, and we need some second lieutenants. So they shipped me to Vietnam. But luckily, by the time I got there, it was 1971, and I only had to spend 10 months because President Nixon said in early 72, okay, we won, everybody come home. But would you believe we actually set up a driving range and a practice area in our compound at Long Binh in Vietnam? And we had the USO visit us twice. And on one of those occasions, they brought in a number of young ladies who were professionals on the ladies' tour. Cute as they could be, and of course, that's what all the soldiers were interested in, seeing cute girls in short skirts hitting the golf ball. And my job was overseeing that little practice range. It was one of the 100 jobs that I had because you work 7 days a week.
Let me ask you this. So you built a driving range in Vietnam. I mean, golf was just part of your life. Everywhere you turned, you were getting bombarded with golf, right?
By sheer luck and opportunity. That's the thing that in my life, Bruce, I had so many opportunities. Many of them I took advantage of, and some of them I didn't, probably should have. Right. But it just opened the door. And when I came back from Vietnam, and I said, I want to get in the golf business, I applied for, I'll never forget, I sent out, not off the computer, but with a typewriter, I sent out 112 resumes. I got about 10 responses back, and I got 2 job offers. One of them was at Ponte Vedra, in the big hotel and inn out there. Right. Magnificent place. And when I went to interview, the guy was former military. He was a retired lieutenant colonel that was the GM out there. He said, son, he said, we got almost boot camp in this business. He said, when you start, you'll start as night manager here, and you'll have to work a year, 7 days a week. And that's the way we do it. I said, sir, I'm just back from Vietnam. I haven't seen my wife in almost a year. I can't be gone 7. He said, well, here's a good offer. Well, I turned it down, and I went home, and you know how you fret over those things. Right. Those things happen in life. And lo and behold, my father called me up that night to talk to me, and he said, son, Sam Nunn and a bunch of the investors over there in Perry have bought and built House to the Lake Country Club. They're looking for a GM. Why don't you call him? They set up an interview. I came out, and I went to work at House to the Lake Country Club.
Put a comma there just so people that hearing this will understand. So he's He's back at Houston Lake Country Club in Perry, Georgia, which is where he was born, which is
Exactly.
30 miles from at the most from Reynolds, Georgia, maybe 25 miles. So just understand.
A full circle right
Yeah.
back to the hometown.
And so tell me, how'd you get to Florida State?
Well, and it's attached to Houston Lake. That's what started it. After 18 months at Houston Lake, and we did some great things. But Bruce, at 25 years of age, that was too much for this young man. It was overwhelming. And my wife said, "Do you think you can sort of work anything less than 75 hours a week?" So I finally went in early August and told Mel Tollison and Dave Holbert, I said, this isn't working. And they looked at me, hurt my feelings, Bruce. They said, "Yes, we know it's not working." So I said, "I'm going back to school because I want to be in this business." And Florida State University's got a hotel restaurant school, and it's not that far away. And lo and behold, 2 days later, I drove down there on my own, took my transcript from Mercer, where I'd gotten my degree, and bingo. For the next 18 months, I got business school courses and hotel restaurant courses.
So,
and when I graduated from there, but I came up and interviewed, tried to go to work at Cherokee Town and Country Club because I'd heard all about it when I was at Houston Lake. But the guy that was managing Cherokee said, "Son, there's another club up on the north side that's about to have a U.S. Open, the first one that's ever going to be held in the South. And he's looking for some managers." I went up and bingo. We got hired in 1975 and working, getting ready for the first U.S. Open, as you know, that Jerry Pate won.
So, Chris, let me stop you. Let me go back just a minute. So, I want the Florida State thing later, because I don't want to miss this. You became Florida State University Alumnus of the Year. Is that right?
And you have to clarify that a little bit, Bruce. That's from the hotel and business school.
Okay.
What we did there, I got very involved in a student organization, and we were able to revive an alumni association that was slowly dying. And after I graduated and even got to the athletic club, we kept up that alumni association. And because of my work with that, they chose me one year, which was somewhat of a surprise, but was certainly appreciated.
Again, I'm thinking about this kid from Reynolds, Georgia, that grew up on this 9-hole golf course. But now you at Atlanta Athletic Club, involved with the U.S. Open. How long was it before you moved up in that organization? And you obviously became general manager at some point. I'm sure it didn't happen overnight.
No, I started at the athletic club really as a third assistant manager. And after the Open, stayed in that position. And the other co-assistant manager with me left. And the GM at that time said, "Listen, I'm going to name you and this is all technical terms, I'm going to name me club manager." And I had that job as the number 2 person at the athletic club until 1986. And for a short period of time, I was in that job for 11 years, and it was like the GM is never going to retire, and I'm never going to be the boss. And a club that you're familiar with by the name of Horseshoe Bend Country Club in Roswell,
right?
It came open, and it interested me as an opening for a GM because they were about to host the first senior champions event off the Champions Tour at Horseshoe Bend Country Club. And that interested me. But at the same time, they were hosting the AT&T Tennis Challenge in the spring, which, oh my gosh, Edberg, Lindell, Agassi, all the great tennis players were coming there. So I was going to be a part of that. And I went there for 2.5 years, ran some of their tournaments, and got really involved in it. And all of a sudden, one day I get a call back from the athletic club, and they said, "Well, the GM is retiring. We'd like you to come out and interview for the job. And I said, well, do I have to do it right now? Or will you give me 10 minutes? And because my heart had always been with the athletic club, and did I know I was going back? No, but in the back of your mind, it lurks and lingers.
So you were at the athletic club for 35 years. Is that what I read? Or
Yeah, right at 36. When you combine my original 11 years, and then you combine the second 25 years when I was there, so it's right at.
So Chris, to talk about some of the tournaments, I know you've hosted several PGA championships. I went to one of them. You've hosted some big tournaments, and kind of talk about how that happened. What's your job as the general manager of that place when the whole world is looking at you?
Well, I was involved along with key people from the board of directors of the club, the president, when we are meeting with the PGA or the USGA to extend an invitation to host these events. You had to literally make these unbelievable presentations to the PGA of America and to the United States Golf Association to lure them to come to the club.
Right.
After I got back in '89, we hosted the 1990 Women's U.S. Open that Betsy King won, and that was my first experience of being the head honcho. In the '90s, everybody wanted to host a major, and finally we got the PGA's attention and had to fly down to Palm Beach and their headquarters 3 or 4 times and do a lot of dinners. And you've been there. You've worked with corporate America. You know what it's all about. And forming a relationship so that they know they're going to have a great championship and have a lot of money being paid to their players. We did that and landed the 2001 PGA Championship, and that was pretty special because it was financially successful. It was just before 9/11. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
a month, right at a month before 9/11. And if it had occurred afterwards, of course, as you know, the whole world shut down for
Right.
6 months. Tournaments were canceled, all events, people went crazy. But we had a very successful event. We went on and they booked us for the 2011 PGA Championship.
So let me just name some stuff, and we'll wrap this up. But I want to. You were the National Club Manager of the Year. I mean, you were obviously good at your profession. You were Operator of the Year by Golf Inc. You also established a Business Management Institute at Georgia State University. So you.
Well, I got very involved in our national association when I got into club management, even at Houston Lake, because they were the educational arm that there are not very many schools that you could ever go to, Bruce, to become a general manager or a club manager of a country club. There wasn't such a thing. It wasn't out there. And through my career, I saw where too many managers were failing. They didn't have the education that they needed. Sure, they had a college degree. They might have even had a master's, but they didn't have anything that focused specifically on club management. So when I got in the position, I was actually at Horseshoe Bend when we started it. I gathered some of our national leaders. We got together over a period of 2 years and finally went to Georgia State, which had instituted a hotel restaurant school. But we went down and met with their professors, and over a period of time, we were able to create an actual school called the Business Management Institute of Club Management. Bruce, if I did anything away from the club that I'm more proud of, I wouldn't know what it is. That turned out to be, there have now been almost 20,000 young people that have gone through that school because it expanded to go from Georgia State to Michigan State to California and back to Cornell up in New York to teach you some very basic things: how to run a golf shop, how to manage a dining room, how to manage a pool, these things seem rather insignificant, but when you take it, we've now got 7 levels of Business Management Institute that go all the way up to tactical management and strategic management. They're classes that master's degree students would be taking. So we got that started, and because of that, and because of the high profile of the athletic club, I would, if athletic club, if I'd still been at Horseshoe Bend, I might not have gotten that recognition. I have to give the credit to the athletic club because of the high profile of the club, and those 2 honors came about because of those issues.
Well, the crowning achievement, the first club manager ever did elected to the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame. Is that right?
That's right. I think it happened because throughout my career, golf not only drove my career, my avocation, my vocation. I try to still play golf a couple of days a week at 75. It doesn't, I don't play like I used to, but who does? And my travels, I got very interested in the early 80s of traveling to the UK and playing the Scottish golf courses and the English golf, and from Ireland to Wales. And Bruce, I have played 82 of the top 100 golf courses in the British Isles.
That's amazing.
It took 31 trips to do that, but my wife would permit me every summer to go with a group of friends. We'd spend anywhere from 9 to 12 days over there. And I got to know a lot of the secretary managers. They call their managers in the UK secretary, with that clipped British accent. But when you've got great places from St. Andrews to Royal Liverpool to Lytham and St. Anne's to courses down along the English Channel, I've traveled that country and I was able to create sort of a relationship. So now the Atlanta Athletic Club has 2 sister clubs in England, not in Scotland actually, but in England. Royal Liverpool Golf Club, where Bobby Jones won one of his legs of the Grand Slam, and another club called Formby Golf Club, Formby. So we have some we have members from both clubs, the athletic club and those clubs over there that are joint members at our club. So
Incredible. But as you know, my brother used to have the Chicken George golf tournament in Reynolds. And see, here you are, the general manager of the most prestigious courses that anybody's ever even seen. And you used to come down and play in that Chicken George golf tournament where you talking about golf in its purest form. Now, there were golfers that could play. There were golfers that didn't know which end of the club to hold. But it was a big time. And somebody told me, of course, you won trophies at that Chicken George, and on all your awards, you still have your you had your Chicken George trophy on your somewhere in the office somewhere.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and it was the ugliest trophy around, and it was beautiful,
because you could say, "This is where I started."
and you know what? I never forgot where I grew up from, Bruce. I've never stopped loving Reynolds Golf Club. The Chicken George just brought everything home to me, because here I was working at one of the finer private clubs, but I was having fun, enjoying myself. My cousin, Jimmy Beeland from Perry, would play in that.
I've said this many times. I spent some of the best times in my life at that Reynolds golf course. It didn't matter if we had to put it up on a worm hill or whatever to hit the ball, or maybe not in grass. It was time with my daddy, time with his friends. I wouldn't take $1 million for 2 things. I wouldn't take $1 million for growing up in Reynolds, Georgia, and I wouldn't take $1 million for the time I spent on that golf course. And one more final thing, and Reynolds is a unique town. The father of arrhythmia surgery, the man that did the first heart ablation, came from Reynolds, Georgia. His brother had the heart wing at a major hospital named after him. There was a
Wow.
lieutenant governor of Georgia from Reynolds, Georgia,
Oh yeah.
trademark lawyer for Coca-Cola that registered the Coke bottle. It registered the Little League Baseball logo, came from Reynolds, Georgia. Guy that gave the commencement address several years ago at Fuqua School of Business at Duke University came from Reynolds, Georgia. A guy that you just mentioned a while ago that got 89 scholarship offers to a little bitty Reynolds
Right.
High School
Right.
came from Reynolds, Georgia. If you watched the PT 109 movie with John Kennedy, the two people got killed in that incident. One of them was Jack Kirksey from Reynolds, Georgia. And now we're talking to a guy that grew up there, learned how to play golf there, has impacted golf literally all over the world, is in the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame. And I just wanted to introduce him to all of you listening. But Chris, I want to end it by giving you an opportunity. You're a perfect example that somebody that you said you had some luck along the way. We all do. You're in the right place at the right time. But if you had to give advice about how to be successful.
Bruce, I think when I was in high school, I had an awakening at one point where I realized that there was a lot of opportunity to do some good things. I got to be president of the Key Club, and the Key Club did some great things for a few years there. It needed some leadership and it needed somebody with some dedication. I was able to do that, and we got named the #1 Key Club in the state of Georgia. The opportunities, the dedication, and the ability to sort of see not into the future, but what you could do to make a difference. Can you make a difference in life? And it could be something very simple. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. I think that led me past management to get into leadership. My time when I wasn't doing as well at Houston Lake, when things weren't going as well and things were coming at me at 90 miles an hour and I wasn't able to make a decision. That's why the young people now, I think, do have some problems because they want responsibility that is beyond their abilities too young in life. They need to do something that the Army calls time and grade. You have to serve some time and experience those ups and downs of life before you can start to make precision, good decisions. So I'd say good things come to those who wait. And for the young people now, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but most of us, it took at least half a lifetime to get there.
To figure it out. Man, thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you coming, and I'm glad that I know you, my friend.
Well, Bruce, if anybody, you are the man of the hour now. You're the one that's leading the troops now with your background, your business background, with your speaking ability, which you got from a combination. Oh my gosh, of your dad, your mom, from Kiki, from Mac, from the school. It all sort of descended upon you, and you've got some real talent there. So I'm glad you're. All we got to do is when you get to heaven, you can say to God, well, I used everything you gave me, and I hope that was good enough. So,
Isn't that the truth? Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.